What is up, guys? This is the Scarlet Duelist back again with yet another pretty good deck profile. This profile is called Nordic Invoked, which is one of the most unlikely combinations I ever thought that I would make, but it works, guys, and it's not one of those decks that is a break-my-board deck. It's not also a plethora of negates either, because I kind of hate those two playstyles because they're all about not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I really enjoy interactive duels, so if that makes me a casual player, then so be it, I guess. But I think this deck is still right in the middle, just how I like it, of being casual or competitive, depending on how you take the skeleton that I've built here and maybe change it to your own liking. Yeah, just keep in mind, all of my deck profiles are meant to be that way, by the way. I play them the way I play them, but you can always substitute cards to make them either more or less competitive, depending on your budget or your preference. So keep that in mind. Take it with a grain of salt if you are a competitive player, and if you're a casual player and you see some things that are like, that's not casual, you can definitely take things out, and I will try to highlight some of those cards for you as we get started. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with the profile. Now, before we start, again, just two things I want to draw your attention to about the deck. It is 43 cards total, because 4 of your 43 are basically upstart goblins, including one actual upstart goblin. That means you're actually running a 39 card deck, so it doesn't really affect your ratios or your consistency very much. Next, you'll see that we're only running 3 traps, which might give you the... Wow, it's gone for a while, still didn't learn how to talk. Yeah, we're running 3 traps, which might give you the indication that we are a going first deck. That's not always the case. What's cool about this deck is it can go first or second and be okay, because it's meant for that grindy control style match. It has some aggro aspects to it, obviously, bringing out the big guys really, really fast. But if you don't, there are other things you can do to disrupt your opponent or to even just keep yourself alive. So let's get started on the actual profile. First, we have 3 Alistar the Invoker. If you're not sure what this does, I'll pull it up. I mean, most people that are watching this probably have an idea. We use this specifically to search our invocation, and then possibly, if you're really into it, giving one of your Mikabas 1,000 attack and defense boost if you really need to. But yeah, we don't really use that boost often. If you want to, you can, though. Next, we have Alvis, which is really the MVP of the deck. You really want to see this in your opening hand. And unfortunately, it's not really searchable, so you just maximize it at 3, and you've got 4 upstart goblins to hopefully get you at least 1. Next, not next, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. So if we look at the effect of Alvis, if you're unfamiliar with it, basically, if I can sum this up, I know you can read, but if I can sum it up for you, you want to banish this off of summoning Gullveig. So you don't want to use this for the initial summon of Gullveig. You use any other Nordic card to get Gullveig out, banish this, and then that special summons, thanks to Gullveig's effect, a Nordic monster. And then after that resolves, Alvis, this card, will resolve, allowing you to send that monster that you just summoned and 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard that equal level 10, and that'll special summon any one of your Aesir monsters that you want from your extra deck. So that's a quick way to speed it out. Otherwise, just use the regular Gullveig effect, get out 3 synchro materials, and bring them out that way. Now, if that monster is destroyed, not even destroyed, just sent to the graveyard, while this is in your grave, you then can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon a different Aesir monster. So lots of recursion and recoverability. I don't know if that's a real word. But recovery, there we go. That's the word I'm looking for. English did not get easier. I'm not learning anything. But yeah, so one thing to keep in mind is that you can only use this effect once per duel. Now, just the banishing effect. You can use the other effect more than once, but you can only use this effect once per duel. And if you do summon it with either effect, by it I mean summon one of your Aesir monsters with either one of these effects, keep in mind that their own recursion effects and recovering them from the graveyard does not work because they were technically not properly summoned. This doesn't say ignoring its summoning conditions, so that's a little foggy when we talk about summoning conditions, but because it wasn't technically synchro summoned, the Aesir monsters cannot be brought back from the graveyard if summoned with Alvis. So that's something to keep in mind. Usually it doesn't matter, but if you're one that really was banking on that monster Reborn, you gotta revive something that was not summoned using Alvis's effect. Next, we've got BLS, Envoy of the Beginning. Really easy to get him out, and yeah, it's just a good card overall. Banishing or getting to attack twice just helps with either OTK ability or spot removal. If you don't want to purchase this, if you don't already own it, just run Eater of Millions. That's also a very good substitute and a very good card. It might even honestly be better. I don't know. I haven't tested it. But thinking about it now, yeah, you could easily replace this with Eater of Millions and just be fine, you know? So next we have Goldfax. This is just there as one of your Nordic targets that you can just use to link summon with. There is this effect that on the off chance your opponent does control a synchro monster, you can bring this out as a special summon, but you will honestly 99% of the time not use that effect. It's also good because you can have a light monster in the graveyard for your invocation or for BLS. Next, we've got, I don't know how to pronounce this, Solf. I don't think I said that right at all, but it's done. Of the Nordic Alfair, this is just another target to, again, synchro summon with. It's a non-tuner. It's a light target. That's a bell. I may or may not be recording on my lunch hour. But yeah, this is a good target for just non-tuners and to have in the graveyard as light monsters for invocation or what have you. And it has that bonus effect that if you do happen to normal summon it when you already have a monster out, if you target one of your ACR monsters, for example, you can special summon pretty much any Nordic monster from your hand because nothing is above level 10 as far as your monsters in your deck. Next, we've got Mara, which is kind of a last resort if you didn't really get anything that's going to go into a Gulveg play or anything else, but you've got 2 level 4 non-tuners in your hand. You can summon Mara and then synchro out one of your big guys and then just play Mound of the Bound Creator, and you still got that protection with a big guy on the field. Next, we've got Mimir, which is really nice because during your standby phase, you can send a spell to the graveyard to special summon this card back to the field. So it's got some recursion. It's a level 2 non-tuner, which is really helpful to have just with the way these combos work. It's a dark target for BLS and... what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, with the spell card effect, you can send Invocation to the graveyard, and if you happen to have to banish an Alistar for that Gulveg play, you can then shuffle Invocation back, add Alistar to your hand, and then go from there. So that's really nice. You just basically got a free Invoked Macabre by using Mimir's effect. Next, we've got, wow, these names. Tangra Sneer of the Nordic Beasts. This is just a target, again, to get out Gulveg and occasionally synchro with. It has these special summon effects, but they're so dependent on battle and stuff, guys, I wouldn't rely on them. On occasion, you'll use them, but not very often. Next, we've got Tangra Sneer, which is, again, it's a better version of what we just saw, I guess, but again, you don't want to rely on getting destroyed by battle to get your plays off. You really want to just do the Gulveg play if you can to speed summon or go into some of your invoked plays. This isn't terrible, though. If your last resort is you had to set a monster, if this gets destroyed, you at least get 2 tokens from that, which isn't terrible. Next, we've got Valkyrie, which was Gulveg before Gulveg. It's decent if you have to go second and your opponent controls a monster and you're kind of afraid to go into the Gulveg play because maybe they've got a lot of negation, maybe they can't negate this specifically. You can summon this and activate its effect, and then you will get a free one of your ACR synchros out because it'll bring out these tokens and you can synchro with those. So it's not terrible, but it's also a light target, so just keep that in mind for maybe your invocation plays or BLS plays. Next is our last monster. We have Vanegas, which is really helpful to bring out because you can augment its level, and it counts for any one of those Nordic tuner monsters because I don't know if you know this, but what also makes the ACR monsters tricky and why they were never really a good deck before was because they needed very specific tuners and non-tuners to be summoned, which was dang near impossible to do, especially once the format sped up at all. You know, think back to 5D's era, even that was slow for then. So yeah, that's why this deck never really made it, but with this being added and some of the other support, it makes it a lot more viable and faster. So, pretty good. And next we have our spells. We've got Called by the Grave at 1 because I'll show you in just a moment. We've got other cards we use to help with hand traps or negation that are a little bit more useful than just Called by the Grave because you also fear some other effects if you have to go second. Next, we have DDR, which is good because you banish a lot so you can bring back something. And with sending things to the graveyard, it's not so bad because sometimes there's some synergy with that, because you do have to discard a card to use this. Then we've got 2 draw muscles. If you're not sure what draw muscle does, I know it's kind of a niche card, but when you use Gulvig's effect, you're automatically bringing out monsters in defense position. So if you have a draw muscle, that becomes an upstart goblin. You may not be able to play the card that you draw right away, but you're at least still gaining back card advantage against your opponent. So if they do get rid of what's on the field, you can come back next turn. So draw muscle, always good in this deck. Then we've got Hatronade just for some of that back row hate. We also have a Twin Twister later, but this helps just kind of takes care of that mass removal problem, because sometimes you can get solemned and that does kind of end your turn if you're not careful. So Hatronade's very useful. If you want to up this, go for it. There's not a ton of back row in the current meta, or even really a whole lot of casual play, so we just have it at 1. But if you find that that's a huge problem in the setting that you play in, add in another 2 Hatronade and you should be good to go. Next, we've got 2 Invocation because it's searchable, but sometimes you want to see it as well, just with the way the deck runs. It's not bad to see this in your hand rather than to have searched it, just because occasionally you can toss it and banish your Alistar and have some synergy there with getting some free +1s or whatever with that. So Invocation at 2. It recycles itself, so just, yeah, 2's good. Lullaby of, oh, excuse me. My voice is going out and I burped, excuse me. Wow. Oh, okay. Really high quality video. Next we've got Lullaby of Obedience, which I've ranted and raved about enough, but again, if you have a problem card that's a monster, just play this, pay 2,000 life points, call it out, and they're either going to give it to you or put it on your field. So you either get it or you get it. That's the kind of the cool thing. It's in your hand or on the field, or if you just want to see what's in their deck, call a card that you know they don't have and they have to prove that to you. So it kind of helps with whatever you're struggling with at the time, but only at 1, because usually you're using it to call out a hand trap that you either get or they just don't get. So it's a win-win. Next we've got Magical Meltdown at 1, just because you already have 3 Alistar, and because it's not our main play, we have it at 1 because if you want to see him, you're basically running 4 copies of him. But obviously in your side deck, you could run 2 more if you really want to do the whole fake out side decking strategy that I really like, where you could just throw in the other 2 and make this more about being invoked control. You can definitely do that, throw in more. Next we've got Monster Reborn for obvious reasons. This deck needs some recovery, so Monster Reborn is always helpful. 2, Mound of the Bound Creator. Just because you have that Gulvig soft lock, you don't always need Mound of the Bound Creator to be viable. So it's in there because the chances of them getting rid of your Gulvig first are high, because it's the one thing that they can get rid of before they would do anything else to your field. So yeah, keeping Mound of the Bound Creator in here is a good backup plan if you lose your Gulvig. Next we've got Pot of Acquisitiveness. We banish a lot right off the bat, so this is an upstart goblin, and you get to recycle some cards, so that's why it's here. Next we've got Regeki, which is just great mass removal. If you don't want to use Regeki, I know it can be pricey for some, Lightning Vortex works just fine. Next we've got 2, Sky Striker Mecha Eagle Booster. This is more useful than Called by the Grave because it can not only protect Gulvig, but let's say you didn't get out Gulvig and you just synchroed, you can set this as a trap, and if your opponent tries to remove your synchros, you can play this and protect them. So it's a lot more protection for your extra deck monsters than people give it credit for. The only bad thing is it is non-searchable, so you have it at 2 because you at least have Called by the Grave and Lullaby of Obedience too. So you've got a lot of hand trap defense and negation defense here for your monsters that are summoned from your extra deck. But yeah, you're going to mostly use this to protect Gulvig because your opponent's going to figure out quickly, if they don't know already, that that's the card to hit with a negate or an ash or whatever. So just have this ready to go. If you want to up it to 3, go for it, but 2's worked fine for me. Next we've got Twin Twisters, just for more back row hate and some synergy with that discard. Upstart Goblin, because Upstart Goblin. 3, Solemn Strike, because you just need some negation in this deck, and it really does help it become a lot more viable. Now, if you want to make this a specifically going first or second deck, if you're going to say going first, leave Solemn Strike and add some other things. If you want to say going second, throw in Effect Veiler, because it's going to be a lot more useful to you. Next, we have Extra Deck. All right, here we go. Invoked Elysium is basically unevenly matched. So if you've played Makaba and recycled back a few, and you've got your opponent's monster out there, you can still, A, get rid of it with Invocation, and then you have Elysium that can banish the rest of their monsters by banishing your Makaba. So, or even itself, because it is every attribute. So if you're dealing with light monsters, banish Makaba. If you're dealing with any other attribute, banish this card itself, and you just evenly matched your opponent minus their spells and traps. So, and it's non-targeting, so they're just banished, that's it. You know, pretty cool. And you get to keep yours, that's what's really fun. Next, you've got Makaba for obvious reasons. It's some control there, some negation. Excuse me. So that's really all it's for, and it's a pretty decent body, really easy to make in this deck because you've got an even mix of light monsters that you can get to the graveyard whenever you want because everything's very searchable in this deck as far as the Nordic monsters. Next, we've got 3 Gullveig because you just need to maximize on that play in case it gets negated and you've got to stall a little bit. You can bring out another one. You don't want to just have 1 or 2 because they could negate it twice. You don't know. But you can stay in the game even if they do that. Next, we have Lanfarincus. Just in case you get down to that last resort, you've got some tokens on the board. You can bring this out and go through some of these other synchros or other plays. Probably the invoked plays. More than one. Next, we've got Beals, just because it's a pretty decent card to have, and you can make it pretty easily. Your opponent sometimes... I've really gone through decks that, like, they think that they've got me, you know, they're about to win, and then I summon Beals, and they're like, I don't know how to deal with that, because it can't be destroyed, and if I attack you, you gain that attack. So it's a pretty good card to have. It's just kind of a last resort if you can't make anything else. Cruel Dragon, just some spot removal and a free draw, so that's an upstart goblin too, if you can make it. We've got Loki just because it's in here. Loki's really not so good, so if you wanted to just triple up on one of your other Aesir monsters, I completely understand. I just put Loki in the deck because I have it. It's not the worst thing that could happen, but it's definitely the weakest of the Nordic gods. Next, we've got 2 Odin and 2 Thor. Thor is good because it negates the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls, so you're usually going, if you're going second, you're going to try to go for Thor. If you're going first, you're going to go for Odin. The reason I say that, well, okay, I shouldn't say that because it really depends on what you're going against. If you're dealing with a lot of back row, go for Odin. If you're dealing with a lot of monster effects, go for Thor. The reason I say go for Odin as going first is your opponent's going to try to get rid of your board just because that's modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So they'll get rid of Gullveig, then try to get rid of this, and if they get rid of this, then that means you're bringing out a Thor to have next turn to negate all of their monster effects. So that's my strategy behind that. This deck is about playing the long game, not necessarily just, boom, here's a big guy, I attack and win because strong. Next, our last thing is Trishula, because you can easily make it, especially with that, oh, where is it? I think it's called, I actually don't remember the name, let me go back. With Mara, that's what it is. Mara you can make. Your synchro materials do need to be Nordic monsters, but you don't have to summon a Nordic monster. So you could make a Trishula by just playing this and synchroing from your hand and really disrupt your opponent. And I mean, I've been Trished and it just kind of wins my opponent the game because if they get rid of the right couple cards, that's kind of it. They're kind of like, well, my plan's done. You know, and Invoked Makaba too. I mean, it banishes the card that it negates, so they're not going to get that back unless they have some really good recovery. But yeah. So that's kind of the gist of the deck, guys. If you want to see some play testing, comment and let me know that. I don't want to spam you with any more information, but yeah, it's a really good deck. I think it sits right in the middle of competitive and casual. It's really fun. Definitely the Invoked engine makes it way more competitive, gives you some control aspects, and you're not usually going to play your Invoked monsters on your first turn if you also play your Nordic gods. But what's really cool is, again, you gain card advantage, and you have this ready to go. If they do get rid of some things, then you have control and can bring things back. It's just, this deck is really good at playing the long game more than people think because of just a lot of the game winners in it. But yeah, play with it, see what you think, change things, change up the ratios to your play style, and yeah, hope you enjoy it, guys. If you do, like the video, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments.